Welcome to Sex Ed with DB. I'm your host, Danielle Bezalel. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the podcast. If you love and support the work that we do, join my crew on Patreon to win amazing prizes like our adorable merch, exclusive behind-the-scenes content, private sessions with yours truly, and incredible sex toys. Go to patreon.com/sexedwithdb to join my crew. Get discounts at all of my favorite brands at sexedwithdb.com. And follow us on Instagram at sexedwithdbpodcast and on TikTok at sexedwithdb. If you want to partner with us, email us at sexedwithdb@gmail.com. Here are my top 3 favorite things I love about Uberlube. Number 1, Uberlube makes sex feel a lot more pleasurable. It's as simple yet as powerful as that. Number 2, Uberlube is recommended by leading doctors, and its body-friendly ingredient list is widely used by people with sensitivities to lubricants. And number 3, Uberlube will not stain clothing or bedding. Any spills can be easily cleaned with detergent and water. Get your bottle of Uberlube now with code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off at uberlube.com. What do I love about my Freya? The incredible razor and clitoral vibrator in one discrete product? Let me count the ways. I love that when I'm already in the shower getting clean, it's super easy for me to grab my Freya and give myself some serious lovin'. I love that I don't need to get out of bed, clean my toy, and get out of the mood. As soon as the mood strikes, my Freya is right there to play with. And I love the smooth, clean shave it gives. Use code SEXEDWITHDB to get 20% off your Freya. And for a limited time, enter to buy one Freya, get one for your bestie for free. Enter to win at highfreya.com/sexedwithdb now. We talk a lot about sex ed, but when we're shopping for products to support our sexual wellness, exploration, and expression, we head to the experts at Lion's Den. For 50 plus years, Lion's Den has been a leader in adult products. Whether you want to explore a new kink or add a little romance to your evening, Lion's Den has something for all. Each location is brightly lit and staffed with the very best experts in pleasure, passion, and romance, so you can feel comfortable and confident in your purchases. Lion's Den is offering our listeners 15% off your purchase in-store and online using code SEXEDWITHDB at lionsden.com. When you think about the words pleasure and power, what comes to mind? If you're a fan, you know my answer will always be the magic wand. As the world's first ever and best-selling massage wand, the Magic Wand's familiar shape and legendary power have made Magic Wand a cultural icon. Revered by millions, it transcends planes of culture and gender. Its impact is so great that Time magazine included it on its list of the most influential gadgets of all time. Want to get in on the fun? Go to sexedwithdb.com/magicwand to learn more and see how you could win your very own magic wand. So, you're ready to experiment with anal play, but you're not sure where to start. If I were you, I'd start with education and products by a company founded by a doctor who's an expert on anal sex. I'm talking about Future Method. Future Method develops science-backed products and doctor-led education to maximize pleasure, eliminate injury, and empower the way people choose to play in the bedroom. They even have a blog that puts education at the forefront on topics both popular and taboo. Use code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off at futuremethod.com. Good morning, Logan. How you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. Excited to be here with you.
Absolutely thrilled to have you. I heard about you through a friend of mine who a couple months ago was going on a date, and they went to a really famous bookstore in Portland. And my friend said that her date picked out your book and was like, "Oh, my date really heard about this really up and famous author Logan Ury and how to Not Die Alone, this really amazing book." And I was a little overwhelmed because it was our second date, but I was like, "Oh, this is interesting." And that's the first time a couple months ago that I really had heard about you. And so I'm really excited to get to talk to you a little bit more about everything you're doing.
Oh, I love that. And that's a great story. Happy that people are going on early dates to bookstores, and maybe you're talking about Powell's in
I think
Portland.
so.
I think that's in Portland. And yeah, just very excited that you invited me and happy to be here.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to people who don't have friends whose dates found your book at Powell's and just tell us about your work.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Logan. I work in the space of dating and relationships. That takes a few different forms. So I work at Hinge as the director of relationship science, where I conduct a lot of research, where I speak to the press about dating trends. It's really fun. I basically get paid to spend time with cool people and think about what's going on in dating and what will come and how to help people find love. I also wrote that book that you talked about, How to Not Die Alone. So I enjoy writing. I have a weekly newsletter. That's one way that I get out information to people. And then I also work with people one-on-one through dating coaching. So that's a really nice way just to keep up to date with what's happening in dating right now. How are people feeling during the pandemic, summer after the pandemic, post-pandemic, all these different moments. What's the vibe? And then I also teach courses that in a larger group setting help people have accountability. They learn in small groups, they learn in big groups, and really help them say like, hey, dating is something I want to really focus on. And it's a way for them to do it together.
You're very busy, it seems. You're doing a lot at once. Are you someone who like really loves, I mean, obviously if you're doing work that you're really passionate about, maybe some of it sometimes doesn't feel as much like work, or maybe it all feels like work. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely work a lot, but I think what's nice is that I'm somebody who craves novelty and I like switching contexts and I get to do that a lot. So, I might be in a Hinge meeting where we're talking about something really practical and operational. And then an hour later, I might be coaching somebody and talking about their breakup. And then I might be doing sales emails for my class. So I think there's enough variety that it keeps it really interesting and uses different parts of my brain. And then, of course, I love this topic and I'm really interested in different phases of dating and relationships. So it's really nice that the focus point for all of those different things is dating.
Yeah, yeah. I imagine like you were one of those people like in high school who was like president of this club and you were like, off doing sports here and like kind of just like everywhere all at once, based on you just being able to juggle so many different things and enjoying doing that.
Yes, definitely very into clubs. I don't think I've ever played a sport, or I played it probably very poorly in like
Okay.
PE, but yeah, definitely kind of a different clubs type person, very into activities. Yeah, I really like staying busy. And I feel like it's really fun when you have a lot of different projects and different colleagues and different balls in the air.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm very similar. So I think,
Nice.
I mean, I'm interested to hear more. Talk to me about what your sex ed was like growing up and, where you're from, what your school sex ed was like, or your sex ed with your family, and how that led you to be this like dating, expert.
Yeah. So I don't think I had very memorable sex ed. I'm from South Florida. I think in sixth grade, we had FLE, like family life education, I think it was called. And it was taught by this like much older woman. And I just remember getting assignments, I have to research hepatitis C. I have to research chlamydia. And people would like run
Right.
around with their index cards being like, I have chlamydia. We thought that was very funny, but nothing too memorable. And then I think in high school, as like part of PE or like half the year, we took some sort of health class, but this is like public school in South Florida, nothing to write home about. So I generally feel like I got very minimal sex ed or nothing too memorable.
Yeah, that sounds just about right. And when it comes to your family or like what you were talking about at home, do you have siblings? Like were your parents kind of, or your, folks who were raising you, like really interested in having any sort of conversation around that?
Yeah, I feel like my mom maybe showed me a book like Where Babies Come From or something like that. And my parents are not prude at all, but it wasn't really a big topic of conversation or, one of those like hippie families where like we talked about vulvas at the dinner table. Like certainly
Right.
not like that. I think probably just like typical boomer parents where they were like, I guess you'll learn in school or I think I talked to my mom about birth control, but honestly, no sex ed critical moments in my life.
Okay. And then how do you feel then that you got so passionate about, dating and love? And I'm wondering if that was like you found love in behavioral science first and then kind of found a path, or talk to me about that.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Like, I feel like what you do and what I do overlap, but are pretty different. So I feel like that, I'm not a sex expert at all. And that, I love the idea of re-educating people with better sex ed, but surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, sex doesn't come up in my work that often. Maybe it'll come up when I'm working with a coaching client and they're like, oh, I love this guy. He's great, but the sex is off. And what can I do? And we'll talk about techniques, but we don't necessarily go like too into the weeds on that. It would be more like, have you talked to him? What are the resources? Has he, said he's had ED in the past, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, actually, I would say like sex is not a huge part of the work that I do, even though, of course, it's a big part of relationships in general. My story is, yeah, I've been really interested in the topic for a long time. I just think it's so interesting that we like, supposedly or maybe traditionally find someone and are expected to be with them for life. And I've really enjoyed learning more about that and kind of taking the myth of happily ever after and really thinking about what's the truth there. And so generally, I'm just really interested in our narratives around dating relationships, our baggage around marriage, and really breaking that down and helping people. And that's where the behavioral science piece comes in. So my background is in psychology and behavioral science. Behavioral science is the study of why we make decisions. So really thinking about, okay, if economics assumes that you're rational and you'll always make the best choice for yourself, and psychology says, wow, you're making a lot of surprising choices, behavioral science kind of combines the two and says people are making these irrational choices, but here are the reasons. And I really enjoy applying that to dating because so much of dating is irrational, and it helps you understand, oh, I keep chasing after the fuckboy, but here's the reason why. And I have this pattern around this, and here's how I can break it. So it's bringing awareness to the decisions that you're making and using that awareness and some new tools to make different decisions.
I really like that. I love this idea of kind of like really thinking more deeply about, maybe like admitting the fact that like you will make some of these decisions just because we're wired this way or because of our culture, because of the messages that we're getting. In your book, you have a section about, like the Disney kind of like fantasy, right? And I think like from a very young age, especially when we're talking about like cis straight women, right? We're given these messages of, oh, like I'm going to just find someone and they're going to fall in my lap and then we're going to live happily ever after. And we're going to talk about a quote that I really love of yours a little bit later on, but I just really appreciate that idea that like there's this recognition that we're maybe not rational actors and that's okay. And like, how do we kind of just like recognize that and make better decisions based on knowing that?
Yeah, exactly. Very well summarized.
Into it. Okay. So you mentioned this, right? You're the director of relationship science at the dating app Hinge. Very cool. I hope you get a lot of credit from your friends and family. I hope they think that that's fucking sick because it is a very cool title and I imagine you do very cool things. But I'm just curious, what does this entail in the day-to-day? What are some of the most like fun and surprising parts of the job? You mentioned you talk to press about the trends in dating. Like what maybe comes up for you around that?
Yeah, so the job has been awesome. I started in early March 2020. So I live in the Bay Area, but I flew to New York where Hinge is located. And then I was in the office for about a week getting to meet everyone. And then the world sort of shut down and I was like, I need to get a flight out of here. So I think I flew home like on a Tuesday and then San Francisco shut down like a few days later. So what's been really interesting, what's been really interesting about that is I've basically had a chance to really track what's been happening in dating specifically during the pandemic for the last 3 years. And so just really watching all of those trends, like tons of usage of the app during the pandemic, what happened when the vaccine came out, what happened when people, had some app burnout and things like that. And so one cool thing is just consistently running surveys and doing interviews and just seeing what's going on in dating during this really extraordinary time, hopefully, once in a lifetime time. So that's part of it. And then a cool part of my job is that I work on something that we call data stories. So basically, I and my colleagues think about a trend that's happening or something that we're seeing. So for example, a friend of mine was talking about dating a new guy and how she really liked him, but there were just some questions that she had or things that she felt like were not going great. And she really wished that he would go to therapy, but that was just something that he wasn't open to. And then I started seeing that more and more where people were like, send me the receipts from your therapist. And so then we did a big research project into how people are perceiving therapy. And what we found was that in previous generations, or even like 5 to 10 years ago, if you said you went to therapy, that might be a red flag for people, like, oh, what's wrong with you? Or why are you sharing that? And now it's considered a huge green flag. And so we got really interesting results around how people would much rather date someone who's in therapy. You're more likely to go on a second date with someone if they mention on the first date that they go to therapy. And so we were able to identify the trend, do some really cool research globally, and then come out with this report that basically said, like, here's what's going on in terms of mental health. Here's what people are looking for. Here's why it's a positive. Here are some tips on either seeking out therapy or talking about therapy. And then it even had an impact on the Hinge product itself, because now we have what we call self-care prompts. And these are things like, my therapist would tell you ... or, one boundary I'm working on ... And so it's a chance for people to take some of that mental health work that they've been doing, or the fact that it's a priority to them, and actually put it in their profile for other people to react to.
This is so cool. I could hear you talk about this for hours. I mean, yeah, I think, like, first of all, like, disclaimer, I think my audience, like, already knows this. I've been partnered in a monogamous relationship for 6.5 years. However, before that, I definitely was on the apps. Hinge was one of them. And I feel like as a user, if I saw that, I would have been so excited and so thrilled that a dating app had been kind of encouraging people to talk about therapy, or to kind of like break the ice around that, because it's the fact that you have data and research behind the fact that people want that makes, I'm sure, it's so much more easy to sell to the product team, like, hey, like, people are interested in this. We need to be talking about it, right?
Yeah, it's been great. And also, it's just another subtle way to show what you're about. So if somebody were to look at your profile and see that you talked about boundaries, or what your therapist would say, and they're turned off by that, great. Now you know that that person's not a good match for you, right? And so at Hinge, we talk a lot about turning the right people on and the wrong people off, meaning, like, if you're both looking for a non-monogamous relationship and something casual, then how can you give that off on your profile so that somebody will know it and pick that up? And if you're looking for different things, how can that also be obvious so that you don't waste each other's time? We talk a lot about dating efficiency and valuing people's time. And so I like that with the self-care prompts, you can really signal, like, hey, personal growth, self-awareness, therapy, mental health, these are things I care about, and I care about enough to choose these prompts. And if you're also into that, that's probably a good sign.
Absolutely. Yeah. One little, I mean, it's not little for them or for me. One side note I'll say is that I have two friends, Lisa and Dan, and they were each other's first Hinge date. And years later, they got married. And it's really fun to hear friends who meet on the apps who feel like their profile's connected and they are really excited to meet each other in person, and then they ended up being each other's person. So if you ever need Lisa and Dan to come on by and talk about their relationship and how they met on Hinge, I'll hook you up.
That's great. Yeah, I love the success stories.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right, let's transition to your book, How to Not Die Alone. So it covers dating A through Z and helps readers overcome bad dating habits using tools and lessons from behavioral science. And I specifically want to kind of ask you about this quote that I kind of was foreshadowing earlier, which is, great relationships are built, not discovered. And as, someone in a monogamous relationship for 6.5 years, I really resonate with this. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about the way in which people find relationships, stay in relationships, and keep them healthy and alive. And I wonder if you can just tease this out for me a little bit and share more about this philosophy.
Sure. Yeah. So as you said, the book really takes people through different stages of dating. So it starts with, all right, you're single. What's going on for you? And there's a quiz, which people can take on my website, loganury.com/quiz, that helps you understand your dating tendencies and the things that are holding you back. Then it goes through lots of different things, like your dating app profile, navigating the first date, getting to the define the relationship moment. Should we move in together? Should we get married? It really has that whole slew of steps. And obviously, like, a lot of people are great at the beginning and they go on a lot of first dates, but they're not getting second dates or third dates or getting into relationships. And so how can you really be more consistent and get to where you want to go? In terms of that quote, it's something that I think about a lot because I feel like one of the negative myths that people are really impacted by is this idea of, I'll know it when I see it, or if this is my soulmate, then it will be easy. If you have to put this much work in at the beginning, then it's not the right person. I think there's a lot of stigma around having crucial conversations or things being hard, with the idea there being, if it's easy, then it's right. And so why I wrote that line is that I really want people to feel empowered. Like, I can make a great relationship with many people, and I can write different love stories with many people. And you don't have to feel like, oh, I haven't found the perfect person yet, and that's why I don't have the perfect relationship. Instead, how can you think, I am the one who can build a great relationship? And it's about finding somebody who's also interested in building versus putting all the pressure on the search to find the quote unquote perfect person.
For some reason, when you just said I can make a great relationship with anybody or lots of people, I feel like I started tearing up. I feel like we don't really get that messaging, like, of this idea that, like, you're wonderful and you bring so much to the table. And, like, the work is kind of like the common denominator here of, like, you being able, and of course, right? Like, that does not mean that everybody is right for everybody. I'm sure there are lots of different ways to figure out whether or not someone is going to be deserving of, like, a second, third date beyond for you, and vice versa, right? It's like, it's not just up to you. Dating is a two-way, and in polyamorous relationships, three-way plus streets, right? It's like, it's very complex. But point being, I think it's a really beautiful sentiment to think about the fact that you have so much to offer, and how can you figure out how to offer that with somebody else, and the fact that it will require hard work throughout your relationship.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think everyone could get along with everyone else, or you certainly would have much easier relationship with certain people. But the main point is, I don't believe in soulmates. I don't feel there's one person out there for you. There's a lot of people who you could create a great relationship with. And it's more about shifting your mindset to saying, okay, which one of the many stories that I could write, which one do I want to write? And I'm going to choose the person where we have that experience. And also understanding that hard work is a sign of a good relationship, not a bad one.
Beautiful. Super into it. Yeah. I think, like, being with a partner for so long, and, like, we recently got engaged, and like, just this idea that there are kind of like peaks and valleys in relationships, and everything other than your relationship can impact your relationship, your work, your stress, your family, your mental
Totally.
health. And it's so interwoven, and it's so complex. And so I really appreciate this really basically, like, normalizing the fact that, like, relationships take really hard work. And if you're told from the beginning that you're not supposed to get in healthy conflict, or not supposed to disagree, then you're, in a sense, like, setting yourself up or your relationship up for failure, because every time you do that, you might see it as a failure in and of itself.
Totally agree.
A premium razor and a clitoral vibrator in one discrete product? What? Why hasn't that been thought of before? Well, Freya did. So you've had a long day, and all you want to do is take a flight to Pleasure Town, but you have to shave before a busy day tomorrow. The game plan? Get an amazing shave with Freya's premium razor filled with aloe and vitamin E shave soap. You can subscribe to replaceable blades for just $9.99 for a 4-pack. And then, okay, ready for this? Remove the razor head, hang it on the wall holder, click the power button, and use the handle as a clitoral vibrator. Freya just put the genius in G-Spot. Use code SEXEDWITHDB to get 20% off your Freya now. And for a limited time, you can enter to buy one Freya and get one for your bestie for free. Enter to win at highfreya.com/sexedwithdb now. Let me tell you about one of my favorite sex toy shops out there, Lion's Den. If you haven't heard about Lion's Den before, I can't wait to tell you all about them. Lion's Den first opened its retail facility in Columbus, Ohio in 1971. That's right, over 50 years ago. Since then, they have grown to more than 50 outlets throughout the US, building its reputation on high-quality products, low prices, and a knowledgeable sales staff. Their staff are also sexual wellness experts who can help you find the perfect toy. One of the many things I love about Lion's Den is that they advocate for a sex-positive perspective on intimacy and sexual well-being. and strive to break the stereotypes and stigma surrounding sex by providing comprehensive educational resources to empower everyone to enjoy life to the fullest. They're simply amazing. Lucky for you, Lion's Den is giving my listeners an exclusive discount of 15% off your purchase in-store and online with code SEXEDWITHDB at lionsden.com. What are you waiting for? Get your amazing Lion's Den toy now. Want to win your very own Magic Wand Mini? If so, keep on listening. Ooh, it's kind of fun to have your attention. Okay, but let's get into it. Magic Wand, aka the best-selling wand vibrator of all time, has partnered with Sex Ed with DB to give some magic wands away to some lucky winners. How can you participate and enter to win? We want to hear your best magic wand story. Maybe something funny or silly comes to mind. Maybe the magic wand unlocked a world of pleasure for you like it did for me. Whatever it is, we want to hear your story. Go to sexedwithdb.com/magicwand to learn more and see how you could win your very own Magic Wand Mini. Let's talk about a lube I absolutely love, Uberlube. Uberlube makes sex better for everyone by reducing friction and increasing pleasure. Whether you're using it for solo sex, sex with a partner, or both, Uberlube has a long-lasting performance that lets skin feel skin. It has simple, body, and condom-friendly ingredients, is scent and color-free, dissipates when no longer needed so there's no sticky residue, and is recommended by leading doctors. Use code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off at uberlube.com. Let's talk about butt acne. Not what you expected me to say, huh? Well, we're here now, so let's get into it. I personally struggle with butt acne, and it really brings down my self-confidence sometimes. One thing that has really helped me is the Butt and Body Scrub by Future Method. Future Method is science-backed and doctor-led, so I know I can trust them. Their quick and gentle exfoliating booty scrub cleanser is great to use on your body and between your butt cheeks. Its doctor-approved ingredients are infused with a refreshing and invigorating hit of citrus, clove, and cedar to soften, smooth, and tone your skin. Get yours now at futuremethod.com and use code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off at checkout.
Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Jennifer Lincoln, board certified OBGYN, and you may know me from social media where I spend a lot of my time educating about everything reproductive health. This podcast is called Let's Talk About Down There, and that's what I'm doing. I am talking about down there with no shame, no stigma, a lot of fun, and a lot of education. And why? Because when we talk about these things, we educate and we empower ourselves. Call in, leave a question, and know that it's okay to have questions about your body, and we're going to answer them.
What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see single people make when it comes to dating or trying to find a partner? And in your book, you talk about this concept of the 3 dating tendencies. So I wonder if you can get into that.
Sure. Yeah. The 3 dating tendencies is a framework that I came up with from having coached a lot of people and spoken to a lot of friends and acquaintances about dating. And I found that even though people are unique, they often have similar challenges when it comes to dating. So this framework divides them up by their unrealistic expectations. That's what they all have in common, but different unrealistic expectations. So the first one is the romanticizer. And this is the one who has unrealistic expectations about relationships. And so they think it's all going to be puppies and unicorns and butterflies. And then in the beginning, they're actually very good at getting into relationships. But then once the relationship hits that inevitable rough spot, and this kind of goes back to my previous answer, they feel like, oh, this must be the wrong relationship for me. And so they're very skeptical. And so they often break up with someone instead of working through those hard moments. And then the second type is the maximizer. And this person has unrealistic expectations of their partner. And so they're really into the search. They feel like, I want to research everyone who I can, and I want to go on as many dates as possible. And I wish I could create this person who's the looks of this person and the ambition of that person, the personality of this. And it's like, they really feel like there's a perfect person out there. Yeah. A Frankenstein date, and feel like, oh, I haven't found my perfect person yet. I have to keep looking, as opposed to what we just talked about, finding somebody great and building with them. They feel like, no, I have to do this really intense search to find this so-called perfect person. And then the third type is the hesitator. And this person has unrealistic expectations of themselves. And so this is the person who is saying, I just can't date yet. Things are really busy at work. Let me wait till work calms down. Or I just can't date right now because I want to lose weight. I want to get a better job. I want to clean my apartment. I want to fix my relationship with my mom. Whatever it is for them, it's like, first this needs to happen, then I can date, as opposed to the idea that you'll never be 100% ready for dating. And instead, you can work on those things in parallel with dating. And actually, dating is the only way that you can really figure out, who do I want to be with? And it's the only way that you can get better at dating.
Yeah. Do you feel like for your clients, there is some overlap between, like, for example, like a romanticizer and a maximizer?
Yeah, I definitely see overlap. And when people fill out my quiz online, sometimes they'll get kind of like the maximum amount in both, or a tied score in both of those. And so I definitely see that. It's like they have the maximizer qualities of wanting to do this intense search or looking for the perfect person, but then they're also really influenced by their romanticizer qualities of, and I believe in a soulmate, and I believe in relationships that if they're right, they're easy. So those can absolutely overlap.
Yeah. Another thing that I'm thinking about too, just when it comes to, this is like I don't know, I guess it's separate, but it just made me think about this idea that, like, what about people who, like, maybe are trying their best, but because they inhabit certain identities that are, like, not as quote unquote desirable, or, they're in a minority group. How do we, like, talk about and think about, like, those kind of cultural scripts that we're receiving about, like, who we want to choose as a partner, like who the mainstream quote unquote, like, people we want to match with are, like, things like that?
Yeah, a big part of my book and a big part of my course that I teach really focuses on this idea of, you think you know what you want, but you're wrong, which is, a hot takey way of saying, we often think we have this so-called type, and that type might be who we were attracted to when we were in middle school and high school, and we just keep chasing, the bad boy or the aloof girl or whatever it is. There's also, of course, cultural scripts that determine who we think is attractive or who we think is desirable. And so I really encourage people to take a step back and date like a scientist, which is my way of saying, really run some experiments. So maybe say, I always swipe left on people who are under 5'8". Well, height doesn't really matter. And most men in the United States are under 6 feet anyway. And so really, what are things that you can do to sort of say, I tend to have this behavior. I'm going to do something differently this time. Maybe I'll like the results, maybe I won't, but at least I will have exposed myself to something different, as opposed to someone who just keeps doing the same thing over and over again and expects to get different results. And so I really encourage people to look at who their so-called type is, try to go against type, and they so often are really pleased with the results.
I'm into that. That's really, yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, the height thing is really interesting. I feel like there is a lot of conversation around height, and I think that it's dumb, frankly. I don't really understand. I think, like, there are a lot of things tied to that of, like, oh, well, if you're, like, a woman, you're like, oh, I don't want to, like, be taller than my guy in heels or whatever it is. And it's like, that really, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't matter, or, like, to me at least. I know for some people it does, but just, I feel like we need to look beyond these, like, because physicality, right? Like, it's more about who the person is. And sure, if you want to be attracted to them, or you want there to be, like, romance or sexuality, or, whatever, those things are important. But as we get older, if your goal is to have a life partner who you can depend on and make a life with, and if you want a family, like, their height being, like, 2 inches shorter than who you anticipated, being with, is a very minimal trait.
Yeah, I totally agree. And in terms of things that I push people on, some of the main ones are age and height. I think people have a lot of preconceived notions around, oh, well, if I date someone of this age, then they're going to want to get married really quickly and have kids, and then they'll rush me. So I need to date someone younger, or this person's too young, they'll be immature. And so there's a lot of misconceptions around age. And then, of course, I think with height, people set these filters and they're literally not seeing these people show up in their apps. Whereas if they met that person at a friend's house or at a bar, they would meet them for their personality, their charisma, how much chemistry they had together, all of those things. And so really just I encourage people to not turn off the filters altogether, but to really broaden them and see if somebody might show up in your app who you wouldn't have seen otherwise, but you might really get along with.
Totes my goats. Moving on to social media. So let's talk about like the way in which social media impacts the way in which we really typically, I would say, only see like a positive reflection of couples' experiences, right? I think everyone listening can relate. Like they know for sure that like one couple who like offline is like fighting a lot and causing a lot of scenes. And then when it comes to like Throwback Thursday, they're like, we're perfect, and like only show the perfect, quote unquote, sides of their relationship, which can be damaging for some people who don't really know how to discern between those messages. And so I'm wondering if you could talk about that and talk about some tools, frameworks in which to think about this more realistically.
Yeah. So I think the general concept that many people know is that people are only sharing one slice of life on social media, and people are rarely posting videos of them fighting or videos of somebody crying after the fallout from a bad fight. And if they are, it's probably for some weird prank or, emotional manipulation, right? This just isn't
Not
generally
normal.
part of how people use social media. So even though we know this intellectually, I think when you're single or when you're going through a breakup, it can be really hard not to compare and despair and not to look at these other people and be like, everyone else has found someone. I'm the last person who's alone. And so I think people do generally know this, but just a reminder that social media is really the highlight reels of people's lives and not necessarily a representation of it. I can't remember where the study was, but I have seen a study that was like looking at people who broke up, and you know that through like their Facebook status changing. They actually were posting more pictures of their significant other in the months leading up to the breakup.
Oh, wow.
And they didn't know exactly why, but the hypothesis would be that you're overcompensating, or that you're hoping for the best, or that you feel self-conscious about the relationship, so you want other people to think things are going really well. And so it is a hard reminder, but I would just generally say, like, you only post your own highlight reels, and so are other people. And so really just not using it as a realistic reflection of what's going on in anyone's life.
That is fascinating. And yeah, that conclusion that folks came to makes sense, of this idea of like, you're trying anything and everything to kind of maybe prove that like this is your person, you want to be in this relationship, and in reality things are crumbling behind the scenes, or things are more challenging. But yeah, wow, don't trust everything you see, basically. And like maybe it's a lesson too for the way in which you, listener, like post on social media. Maybe consider like how you're contributing or not contributing to kind of these potentially like harmful or unrealistic scripts for other people. I just think it's good to be critical about that and think about that. Okay, so you being the director of relationship science at Hinge, right? Like, talk to me maybe about how you see, if at all, expectations of monogamous relationships shifting and changing, in our current time, like and if they are, and if folks are tending towards more open relationships or consensual non-monogamy, how can that be like more successful?
Sure. Yeah. So in my 3 years at Hinge, the company's view on this has changed. So our tagline was and continues to be designed to be deleted, but that does have a bit of a monogamous slant to it if you think about it in terms of, oh, well, I'll meet one person and then I'll delete the app, as opposed to I'm in one relationship, but I'm dating other people. And so I might continue having the app to do that. And so Hinge really does pay attention to what people are putting in their profiles, what they request, what they want. And so what we were seeing over the last few years is a lot of people were putting ENM in their profiles. So your audience probably knows it stands for ethical non-monogamy. And so, it was coming up, and people are using this precious real estate on their app to say that this is what they're into and what they're looking for. And so after a lot of thoughtful research, we came up with a new feature where you can specifically say what type of relationship you're looking for and what your dating intentions are. And so you can say if you're looking for monogamy or non-monogamy. And then there's also a chance to say, looking for something serious, looking for something casual, still figuring it out, things like that. And I love these features because they really do honor the experience that people are having, where if enough people are writing E&M, clearly there's a desire for that to exist on the app. So why not just make it easier for people? And then also it helps save time. Like if non-monogamy is not your thing and you see that on someone's profile, great. You don't need to engage with them. And if you are non-monogamous and you felt like, oh, there has to be this disclosure moment where I tell people this is what's going on, now you can just do it on your profile. And so it's really been nice to see that recent shift, because it makes me feel like Hinge really is paying attention to what people want, what they're putting on their profiles, and just the changing nature of relationships, sexuality, etc., which obviously are becoming increasingly fluid.
Yeah, I think totally. It's really just interesting, even in my own like friend circles, to hear about like how people who have been in monogamous relationships for a long time are like starting to flirt with the idea of like opening up their relationship or figuring out if they want to have a threesome, or, you know, all of these ideas of if you're feeling solid in your relationship and you're feeling like you've maybe talked about like this idea of like, okay, what do we do if jealousy comes up, or what are our boundaries, or what are the ways in which we are communicating about this? It does really require a lot of communication and a lot of openness around the way in which you find that. And so I think it's awesome that Hinge has adapted, and I hope all dating apps have, to really fulfill this newer curiosity that people are having, that people in queer communities have been experimenting with and engaging with and living in for a very long time. But I think like mostly straight or fluid folks are kind of now more than ever kind of entertaining this idea. Do you have an idea as to like what is kind of causing that? Or do you think it's like just by the nature of like progress over time? Or do you have any theories around it?
Yeah, I don't specifically have any theories on that, but I would just say in general, fluidity really feels like where people are headed. So it's like, why do I need to say that I'm male or female? Why can't I adopt an identity of my own or be non-binary or something in between, whatever it is for you, and really not feeling like you have to be defined by pre-existing terms. And so it makes sense that when you have that around gender identity and sexual orientation, it's also going to apply to relationships, and that people are just like, I don't accept that the only option is one partner for life, monogamy, marriage, etc. And so it's really exciting to me that there's some disruption in this area, and that people are really taking a step back and saying, for right now, what I'm looking for is this, and here's why. And the good thing, or one of my favorite things about non-monogamy, is that it seems like people really spend a lot of time talking about boundaries, talking about jealousy, talking about their wants and needs. And so by nature of the fact that it's not just the traditional monogamous relationship, it really engenders some great discussions and open communication.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, we have a couple more questions left. This has been so fascinating to hear you talk about this. So thank you again so much for being on. I would love to hear a love story, please. I want to hear about a time that you helped someone find their life partner through your coaching or through your other work. And we don't have to name names, but would love all the gushy details, because I am a sucker for a love story.
Sure. Yeah. Over the years, there have been some really memorable stories. And with my book, even people I didn't work with one-on-one, I love when they share, because of your rule, go on the second date as a default. I did, and now I'm engaged. Or so one love story is that there's a woman who's in my class, which is called Propel, and she was in the first session. And in the class, there's these pods, these small groups that you meet with, and you talk a lot about what your tendencies are, what your bad habits are, what you're trying to break, and they help hold you accountable. And so she was talking a lot about going after the avoidant guy, and how she felt like, guys that were more secure were boring. And she was definitely into that anxious avoidant loop. And then during the class, she went on a date with someone, and she was telling her pod about it. And they were like, wow, he sounds great. Like, this is what you should be going for. And she just wasn't that into it. And they really encouraged her to give him another chance and keep dating him. And they would just remind her, like, this is the exact bad habit you're trying to break. And so that was maybe 18 months ago. And then they actually just got engaged last weekend.
Ah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I imagine it's really a unique experience having a group of people who maybe you don't really know super well, at least not before this class that they're taking together, and for them to all be like, go for it, like you could do this, and just be, behind her, rather than like a group of friends, right? Like friends want to be good friends. So maybe friends would say like, oh, if you're not feeling it, then don't go for it.
Totally.
Like trust your gut or whatever. But I'm sure that's really validating having that happen in your class.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. And I think your friends make better cheerleaders than coaches. So they're on your side and they're making you feel great and they're rooting for you, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have the strategy or they know what's best. Whereas in this class, I'm teaching every week. So people are getting a lot of information from me and they're applying those values and that strategy. But then kind of most importantly, they've just heard from the person, like, this is what I struggle with. This is my tendency. And then they can really hold a mirror up to that person and say, hey, you're just repeating the same thing over and over again. Why don't you date like a scientist? Why don't you try this other thing? And so I really feel like this pod setup is different from your friends and is really a powerful way to help people change their behavior.
Are you accepting new clients in Propel now?
Yeah. So actually, I'm not sure when this episode will come out, but
kind of soon, within the next couple weeks.
Yeah. A new cohort of Propel is starting at the end of February. And then we don't have official dates for the next one that we'll do, but likely one in the fall, but TBD. But yeah, we always are accepting people on the wait list and then we'll email you when it comes out. But it's just been really fun because a lot of people are like, well, class seems okay, but wouldn't it be better to do one-on-one coaching with you? And I'm like, one-on-one coaching is great, but I'm not the same as an accountability group of people who are listening to you every day and meeting with you. And there's kind of like the consistency there and the intensity of these pods that I think really can change behavior in a way where one-on-one coaching is helpful, but doesn't necessarily have that intensity of these like meetings very often and people holding up that mirror to you.
Hell yeah. If I was single, I would for sure join your camp. I think of it as a camp. Really, it's a class or a course, but it's
like a boot camp. We can call it a camp.
Boot camp. Yeah. It feels like a fun way to who doesn't like talking about like dating and kind of like what's going on with them and having a group of people like be able to bounce ideas and thoughts off of. It sounds like a really healthy way to kind of process the new tools and skills that they're learning.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay. Where can our followers find you and kind of join what you got going on, and what are you working on? What's next for you?
All right. So people can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Logan Ury. I have a weekly newsletter called Logan's Love Letter that comes out on Thursdays, and people can sign up for that. There's a link in my bio on Instagram, or if you go to my website, and people can take that quiz for the 3 dating tendencies at loganury.com/quiz. In terms of what's next, enjoying life at Hinge, enjoying my class. A couple cool new media opportunities are coming my way that I can't talk about just yet, but
Fun.
In general, just staying on top of what's going on in dating, and really having the pleasure to learn about Gen Z dating, post-pandemic dating, just lots of fun exploration there.
Lovely. Well, that's fantastic. I can't wait to hear more about your insights and finish your book. And it just is so fantastic so far. So thank you so much, Logan, for being on. It's been a real pleasure and I've loved learning from you. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thanks for the great work that you do.
Our creator, host, and executive producer is me, Danielle Bezalel, aka DB. Our co-producer and communications lead is Catherine Cohen. Our social media intern is Sarah Kelly. Our music theme is by Hook Sounds. Thank you so much to our featured guests, partners, and our listeners. Want to advertise with us? Email us at sexedwithdb@gmail.com. For more sex ed content, follow us on IG at sexedwithdbpodcast and on TikTok at sexedwithdb. See you next time.